Chair. Tonight, the Commission will consider the following items. Sadie Nguyen, DTS support, will discuss electronic communications for the Planning Commission information item only. Is there an echo?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Can you all make sure your microphones are off in Teams, please? Thank you.
Okay. The second item is the fiscal year FY 2025 changes to the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development, CPHD, development-related fees for planning, zoning, and inspection services, effective July 1st, 2024. Before we begin, I would like to share a few logistical points for all participants joining the meeting remotely and in person. For presenters and speakers joining us through Microsoft Teams, please keep your phones and other electronic devices muted until you are called upon by the clerk. Please turn off the sound to any devices around you to minimize interference. Please keep your cameras off until the clerk announces your name to speak. When called upon, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is in the meeting command bar at the top of the screen. Neither the moderator nor the clerk has the ability to unmute your mic. Once you have spoken, please mute your mics and turn your cameras off. If you are dialing in by phone to join the meeting, press *6 to unmute. Public speakers will be called upon by the clerk at an assigned time. Pre-registration and email confirmation to speak at tonight's hearing was required. We are not able to accommodate additional speakers. All speakers, virtual or hybrid, will receive 2 minutes to comment as an individual. Only representatives of a county board appointed advisory group or committee or commission will receive a 3-minute comment period. A timer will be displayed on the screen if speaking virtually, and speakers in person will follow the timer stationed on the podium. Audio of tonight's meeting is available via phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity, please reconnect by phone. However, if you're dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide you an audible 30-second warning to wrap up your comments. You will be muted when your time has expired. The meeting chat is active for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance only. Please do not use the meeting chat for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for further information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. Tonight's meeting will be available for review through the YouTube and Microsoft Teams platforms. A link has been provided for the Planning Commission website, or on the Planning Commission website. The meetings will be available for a review with closed captioning on Comcast Xfinity channels 25 and 1085, Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40, 24 to 48 hours after the adjournment of the meeting. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website via a link to YouTube as stated. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the VA Freedom of Information Act requirements. One item not on the agenda, there's chips and salsa and guacamole in the back room. So if anyone would like a snack, that's there. Madam Clerk, please call the first item.
With that, our first item for the evening is the Arlington County Electronic Communications presentation. This is Planning Commission Electronic Access and Technological Support. This is an information item only. We have DTS staff, Sadie Nguyen, to present this item this evening.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Sadie Nguyen, and I'm representing the Department of Technology Services, also known as DTS. So thank you, Madam Clerk, for the opportunity to speak with the Planning Commission. A little closer, okay. Thank you for the opportunity to.
Can you move your mic a little closer?
Oh, even closer? Okay, is that better?
Oh yeah, wow.
Okay,
yes.
All right,
Thank
I'll start over. So good evening, everyone. My name is Sadie Nguyen. I'm representing the Department of Technology Services, DTS. And thank you, Madam Clerk, for the opportunity to speak with the Planning Commission tonight to inform you all of the new technology that will be able to be accessed starting next month. I will provide a brief presentation for you all to kind of highlight the key areas and let you know what to expect and what will happen. So let's begin with what is changing. Beginning April 1st, the county will start to extend access components of the productivity suite for technology to Planning Commission members for internal communications and collaboration. So what does that mean in basic terms, right? To be specific, the county is allowing the Planning Commission members to have county email address, utilize Microsoft Teams and OneDrive for document storage. Access to this technology will provide value and enhance the collaboration amongst the members. Once again, this is for internal communication only. Okay, sorry. So why is this changing? The county board, county administration, and planning commission leadership believe that this change is going to create a secure and standard technology workspace for all of the members to collaborate with each other and the county staff. This will further make it a seamless process for collaboration because everyone's using the same platform. Next, how would you get started? So approaching the April 1st date, the commission clerk will distribute your email address and your first-time password. Before getting started, however, there are some key responsibilities to being able to access the county resources. Two of which that I want to highlight is what do you need to know about the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, and what is acceptable use policy for these county resources. Both will be provided in the instructional email that's going to be sent to you prior to the launch. Updating your password online to something unique that only you know will be part of that process and then part of the tutorial. Also, MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, will be utilized and set up to make sure that everything is secure when you're accessing these resources. How do you use these tools? There will be a basic tutorial created to get you started, which will include sending email and messaging through your calendar using Microsoft Outlook, collaborating with the colleagues, as I mentioned before, whether that's asynchronously through chat, live meetings, or through Microsoft Teams. Lastly, creating and editing and sharing documents using the Microsoft OneDrive. So we all know that with technology, there's always the off chance that something could not perform as expected. So how do you get help? We're asking that you please utilize current existing channels through the Madam Clerk to help you resolve those issues. If it's a complex issue that maybe she can't solve for you, then she knows the appropriate parties to reach out into DTS to get that squared away and to continue your experience being seamless. All right, does anyone have any questions about that?
I do believe we had at least one person on the dais who would like to recognize.
And listen, this is probably not a comment-worthy discussion for us, except for I want to note one thing. Commissioner Weir has been the biggest advocate for this for the 5 years that I have been on Planning Commission. And I just want to make sure that all my colleagues know how hard he has worked to make this happen for us, particularly in this season of us getting lots of FOIA requests and how difficult and onerous it has been for us to make sure that we know all the search terms, that we know how to compile the information the way that we're supposed to. But for his steadfast and consistent and earnest dedication to making sure that every single person on the county board, every single person on staff, the county attorney, former county board members, but for Daniel Weir making sure that he was the flag bearer for this, we probably wouldn't have this. So I just want to take a moment to shout out my colleague.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel. I've never been called a narc before, but I appreciate I appreciate that. I do have a question about this, just one.
Okay, I'll recognize Commissioner Weir and then I'll recognize myself and then Commissioner Streiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just for the record, this is an informational item. We will be moving off of this in 10 minutes at the most. Thank you.
So first off, thank you. It'll come as no surprise to hear me say that I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think that this is very important for the commission and will ultimately help the commission and help the FOIA officer and related parties tremendously. And my apologies in advance for any technical support requests that you're likely to get. The only question I have is, you mentioned internal. Does that mean that communications are going to be restricted to the domain only, or is it internal meaning for official use? And I might have a follow-up.
Okay, sure. So mailboxes will be restricted for external use. So you will get a message if you're trying to send to an external email address that says prohibits sending to that email address.
All right, I do have a concern about that. We can refine this. It is very common that we get emails from members of the community saying, I would like to make sure that you understand what this particular block looks like, and can I walk you through that? And the setup as you've described it would make it impossible for us to reply to emails that I assume would be to addresses that are made available online as is currently the case. So I hope that there's an opportunity for some refinement around that, and identification of needs, but it certainly doesn't have to happen from the dais tonight, and thank you again.
So in recognizing myself and in following up on Commissioner Weir's comments, because he picked up on a nuance that I had not picked up on, these are essentially for purposes of communications outside of Arlington County. This is a one-way inbox. We can receive but not send.
So the email inbox will be restricted for internal communication, meaning that you all can email one another and county staff. You cannot send or receive to email addresses that are external to the county.
So we still need to have, I think all of us or almost all of us on the commission have created our own version of a Gmail account, something like mine is arlpcsteinberger@gmail.com. And that's what is publicly available in, the little bio thing on the website. And that's what people in the community use to reach out to me. I'm not sure that this actually, the way this is set up, I'm not sure it fully reduces the FOIA burden on us, because when we're requested to FOIA things, we're now going to have to check 2 email inboxes.
Okay, so I would say or suggest that maybe you defer to Madam Clerk to refine the requirements of your need.
Okay.
And then she can communicate that to the appropriate parties within Department of Technology Service.
Because I appreciate the direction that we're going in here. I think that it is a half step that misses in large part the greater burden that a FOIA request places on us.
Understood.
So that is the concern. Okay, but thank you. Commissioner Steiner.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same sort of question, but that's taken. So the other one I was going to ask is the shared documents in OneDrive. It's maybe a legal question, but would that constitute a meeting of sorts? Because we could technically be in a shared document at the same time, editing something and communicating with each other, not directly, but, making edits simultaneously.
I don't know who that question is directed to, but council is not here, so I don't know that anyone's here to,
Yeah, that's a Minchow.
We
Yeah.
have been advised in the past that one of the main issues is simultaneity, but in the specific context that you're asking the question, I think I would want to ask the chair to get confirmation and the clerk from the county attorney.
So we'll say that then. That's something to ask about.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Madam Clerk.
We will inquire with county attorney, and I hear what your question is, and perhaps, and I'm not speaking on it, I'm just saying maybe there will be some type of exception for this type of situation, since we are providing you all with the email addresses to be able to appropriately communicate with one another. So we will ask that question.
Right. We can't turn it into a chat.
Correct.
But if we're making comments on a document,
Correct.
not at each other necessarily.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a nuance there.
Okay.
I think that's an appropriate clarification for us to receive, and Madam Clerk, I appreciate you taking that forward to council. Commissioner Peterson.
Just as the SPRC chair, the majority of our interactions are to email addresses that are not internal. And so whether we're emailing other commissions, civic associations, like that entire process, if you're chairing a project, is emailing external email addresses. And so if we are not allowed to use this new email address to do a large part of our commission work, then now we're having to maintain 2 separate email addresses and check 2 separate emails and do our work in 2 separate places. And to be honest, I will not use this new email address if I don't have to, if I'm not required to, because that just, this new approach actually increases my workload. And so that's the feedback that I would give to whoever is crafting possible changes to this policy. The actual use cases that the majority of the emails that I send out for SPRC chair purposes would not be for internal email addresses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point, we appreciate.
I just have one
We
more
appreciate the. Okay, Commissioner Patel, and then I'll wrap up.
So can we, Madam Clerk, maybe you can find out if we can ask for a all PC email, like for external emails to us, so that we can all kind of see it. Whether we respond or we don't respond is a different question, but I think if we get an all PC members email, and then if we send a response back to you, then you actually have the ability to be able to collate those responses. And that puts an extra burden on you while we're trying to parse through these concerns that we have about managing 2 email accounts. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So I think just kind of to wrap up a little bit, and I'll give myself the last word because I can. We really appreciate the step forward, and I think that this takes us in a technology direction that is appropriate and necessary. You know, obviously there is, I think, an opportunity. I'm hoping that what you heard was some constructive feedback from commissioners this evening for how these email addresses can be most beneficial and not duplicating efforts or our work, but, you know, taking us in a direction to, you know, ease the burden in particular for FOIA requests in an appropriate manner, since, you know, we are all volunteers, but that was hard to say. So, you know, we're excited about the technology that's being offered, and I think that, you know, hopefully we can get some clarification so that we can continue to move this in a direction where it could really take the place of these ad hoc email addresses that we've created somewhat willy-nilly on Gmail, that we use to, you know, to communicate with the public. Because for, you know, better or worse, we are a very public-facing body, and we do get a lot of community feedback. Sometimes it's even positive. It's not usually, though. And that's something that I think we want to make sure that those interactions we can maintain in an appropriate way and be responsive when we do get FOIA requests and otherwise. If there's additional information that you all or county board or other staff need to hear from us with regards to how we would be using these email accounts, if council needs that information, you know, we're certainly happy to provide that. And, you know, we look forward to continuing to move the ball forward this way. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Madam Clerk, when you're ready to call the second item, let's do it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Nguyen. That was a very good presentation, I thought. Item number 2 is fiscal year FY 2025 changes to the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development, CPHD, development-related fees for planning, zoning, and inspection services effective July 1st, 2024. We have Cynthia Hernan, our business, what does the BOD stand for?
I'm the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, that's good. For CPHD, she will be giving our major presentation. We have Anthony Fusarelli, we have Debbie Albert, and we have Louis Araya as well.
I have a long neck, so I got to bend down here. Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Cynthia Hernan. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of CPHD, Community Planning and Housing Development. Thank you, Madam Chair, for all your work getting us organized, and good to see everybody. I actually only come in front of you once a year, so this is a big night for me. Thank you very much. So we are item 2, and so I just want to walk you through primarily the changes that the Department of, again, CPHD and the Department of Environmental Services, or DES, are proposing for FY25, excuse me. So to do that, I want to give you a little bit of background on the fee analysis that was recently completed with those departments I mentioned, and also with the support of a consultant. And then I want to provide just a broad overview, and this more or less tracks what is in the board report, if you've had an opportunity to do that, to look at that. If not, I'll be giving a summation of that. And I just want to point out, our focus this evening is just the fees that are on the zoning fee schedule. So obviously, that is the zoning fees, also the planning fees, and then a subset, a very small select number of fees for DES that are companion fees, if you will, for discrete planning items. And then I'm happy to open up to questions, anything that you have on your mind. So before I jump in the slide, I want to give you a little bit of context about the 2 funds that we have in front of us, the general fund, I'm under scope here, and the development fund. For the development fund, about 16 years ago, the county created this, which is essentially an enterprise fund. We call it a development fund. We just feel that's more accessible terminology. But it was created to respond to the community's needs for enhanced customer service for development and related fees or services. And so what we ended up doing is moving the zoning division and then the inspection services division, which has a separate fee schedule, into this new fund. And at that time, 16 years ago, we restructured the permitting fees to make sure that the operations of both zoning and ISD are 100% self-sustaining. So in essence, the burden in terms of we're always looking at customer impact, we want to make sure that there's some parity, that we're structuring our fees and reducing any fee changes over a course of number of years. In this case, for a development fund, the only customers, be it developers, applicants, or a residential homeowner that is affected, it's only affected if they're actually pulling a permit to do work. There's no burden on the regular taxpayer. So I just wanted to point that out. So that is our development fund. Separately, you're familiar with the general fund. Just for context and reference, our planning division within CPHD is in the general fund, and also DES. And again, they both have development services fees. So in general, as I think we all know, development activity fluctuates greatly, right? And so two good examples more recently be when Amazon came to Arlington County, there was an influx. We did have some development related to that. And then conversely for COVID, and we're still sort of recovering from that right now, is that the development has gone down. We're still very busy. We still have a steady number of projects coming in, and we're hoping over time, as inflation continues to decrease, that the market will rebound even further. So given this new environment, and given that we haven't had the opportunity to comprehensively review the fees that I've mentioned in quite some time, we thought it was appropriate, the county did, to bring in a consultant to work with us to analyze our fees. And the goal of that was to really determine what the current cost recovery levels are. So let me kind of explain sort of what that actually means in simple. So cost recovery is really the cost of all county resources. So we're talking staff, we're talking office space, we're talking, turning on the lights, things like that, that are required and associated with delivering our services. So services in the first bullet is processing, reviewing, approving permits, plans, inspections, and other types of development-related activity. Costs include the amount of staff time, their hourly rate adjusted for inflation, overhead, indirect costs. So you can, as you can imagine, over the last 18 months, almost 2 years, this was a fairly labor-intensive effort that staff undertook. So for the general fund, just before I move on, there are about 94 fees that were reviewed by staff. In DES, though they have over 100 fees, the ones that are germane to this evening are about 60 fees that are related to planning. And then development fund, there's about 106 fees for zoning. And again, we had over 200 fees that were looked at for ISD that's outside of the scope of this evening. Okay. So what we mentioned in the board report is the actual fee increases. And so I just want to walk you through sort of the methodology. So for planning, our goal is actually, I think I skipped a slide here. There we go. Okay, my apologies. So as a result of this 18-month analysis, we ended up, with the help of a consultant, realizing that our fee recovery right now, so in FY24, is a range of recovery levels. Some are as low as 1 or 2%. Some are in the teens. Some are, approaching 100% cost recovery. But the vast majority of them were under recovering. And so from a policy perspective, our proposed cost recovery goals starting in FY25 for the development fund, again, because that's a self-sustaining fund, is obviously 100%. For the general fund, we have two different policy goals. One is for planning at 75%, because a quarter of planning staff time, particularly in current planning section, are spent doing other things. So we felt it was would not be fair to our customer groups, our applicants, our residents to charge for that time because it's used outside of the fee schedule. And then a policy decision was made by DES to go for 100% cost recovery. And so again, with the notion of we're always very mindful as a county to limit and to spread any potential impacts of fee increases. In this case, we intend or we're proposing to do that over multiple years, again, to mitigate any customer burden. But in addition to some increases, we're also decreasing some fees. You know, it's sort of the other side of the coin. We're also eliminating fees. And then we have a fair number that will remain constant, meaning there is no change in FY25, because we mainly want to continue the work that we did with the consultant to dig a little deeper to generate additional revenue. So if we were to become before the county board, before you and other bodies in terms of our civic engagement, we would have more data and we would think a better grounds to be able to propose anything. There are also a handful of new fees. And so in addition to the work I just mentioned that we're going to be doing outside the budget cycle, there's also a whole series of structural and administrative changes that we're proposing that we would do, mainly for administrative ease for our customer, to make things more organized, to have an easier to understand sort of typology for a lay resident in particular when they look at zoning fees. And then also any structural changes that would benefit the fee schedule overall. So let's talk about what we did. So for our FY25 proposed fee increases for the planning division, we are proposing to do those over multiple years. And so the methodology after working with the consultant and just pulling tons of data is to increase fees no more than 30% over a series of years until cost recovery is achieved. And again, our policy decision was at 75% cost recovery. And so what this would look like in fiscal year 25 is that there are a number of fees that would actually reach as a result of that 30% 75% cost recovery. But there are many more that may take multiple fiscal years to achieve that. For zoning, the proposal is over 3 years, and so fees under 70% cost recovery would increase 30% in the coming fiscal year in 25. And then those between 71% and less than 100% would be adjusted to full cost recovery, meaning 100% in 2025 fiscal year. For DES, their policy decision was that any significant fees would be, again, with the goal of mitigating any customer impact, those would be over 3 years. And so significant is defined as over $100, meaning the delta between FY24 and 25, or 100% increase between those 2 years. For a new fee that DES is proposing is a 10% technology surcharge. For your reference point, right now there's been since the creation of the development fund and for planning fees, we've had a 10% surcharge. So DES is proposing to have one as well. And the primary goal is to make sure that we can maintain and support our Permit Arlington system, which is one that went live. All of our permitting fees have been moved over for quite some time now. So that is live, up and going. It's providing 24/7 services to all customers. But in order to maintain that, there are costs related to that. And so the technology fee not only helps to pay for that and cover those costs, but also helps to build a reserve for the future changes to the system or any other technology that supports these business units. Lastly, for DES, they are proposing to remove about 29 fees. And as I mentioned earlier, there are a fair number of fees until we complete our analysis that would not change in FY25. Okay. So I've talked a fair amount about customer impact. To that end, we actually wanted to give you a couple of samples. So this slide is sort of showing you the proposed changes to the planning portion of the zoning fee schedule along with DES's portion of that same schedule. On the next slide, we'll give some examples for the zoning fees. So we have 4 types of projects. The first ones are special exception site plans. Then we have a rezoning and a landscape plan change. So the first special exception site plan, in this case, we're talking about a semi-detached dwelling and it's 2 residential units. If I work my way across the columns for FY24 fees and FY25 fees, you see the increase for planning fees abbreviated by the PLD there is about $1,100. For DES, their increase is a little over $1,000. So the total increase represents about 39% or $2,100 and change to the customer. The second project is much larger. It's a rezoning and a site plan application. It's an entitlement project, 31,000 square feet, 128 committed affordable units, and about 3,000 square feet related to a child care center. For planning fees, they're going up a little shy of $6,000. And then for DES fees, they're going down significantly, so a negative $9,700. And so if you total all of that up, it actually goes down to the customer about $3,800, representing about a 6% decrease overall. For rezoning, just to continue across the columns, planning is proposing to increase their fees by $915. And then DES is proposing to eliminate that fee from their portion of the fee schedule, so there would be no cost to the customer. But the total increase is just 3%, again, representing the increase in planning. The last example here is the landscape plan, and that's for a side-by-side duplex in an R27 zoning district. And that overall increase represents 49%, and it is $96 total. Moving on to some sample projects for zoning. Project types, the first one is 1 and 2 family detached dwellings and townhouses, followed by 2 multifamily hotel and motel type projects. So going back up to the first one, project description, this is a little over 4,500 square foot single family dwelling. There is no increase proposed for FY25 for the fees that go into that project. For the second one, this is a new construction of 11-story apartment building. We're proposing an increase of a little over $3,100, which represents a 36% change to the customer. And winding down on the last one is an installation of a 600 square foot pool on deck roof. And that would increase by $122 from FY24 to 25. And again, that's representing a 36% change. And I should note all of the fees on this slide and the one I mentioned for planning and DES have been adjusted for inflation, and they all include a technology surcharge of 10%. To conclude, in addition to speaking with you this evening, we are having 3 other opportunities for engagement around the proposed fees. The first one is NAIOP, which is a commercial association, real estate development association. We're doing that next Thursday or Wednesday, March 13th, followed by the following day on Thursday. We have a county board work session from 3 to 6, and that is on March 14th. And then our county board tax and fee hearing, which would be in early April 4th specifically. So at this point, we're happy to answer any questions. So I will turn it back over to you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any commissioners wishing to be recognized on this item? Okay, I will recognize myself because I had a couple questions then. So at this point, I understand that some of the analysis is still going on. What is the timing anticipated to complete some of the analysis for the fees that are still being studied?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think it's going to vary greatly by fee and by division and the number of fees that require that additional analysis. I don't know if my colleagues, our planning director or our deputy zoning administrator would care to speak to that. Okay.
Certainly. Thank you. Good evening. Anthony Fusarelli with the Planning Office. Appreciate the question, and I think the way I would characterize it is a number of the many of the planning related fees in the zoning fee schedule currently, as you see in the attached schedule, or the schedule attached to the report, would be updated if the board acts on those changes in fiscal 2025. There is roughly, I'd say, about 10 or 12 of our existing fees that are currently in the schedule, for which, through this analysis, I think we discovered and identified opportunities to really make some significant improvements. In a few instances, it really would involve consolidating or collapsing 12 different types of rezonings into maybe 2 different types of rezonings. It would look at potentially restructuring how we assess our fees for site plan applications, for example. Those are just to name a couple. We would be looking, and I think as we discussed last week, for those who are participating in Long Range Planning Commission meeting, we are focusing some of our time over this calendar year to be able to further analyze and develop recommendations on those families of changes and be able to incorporate those in time for the fiscal 26 budget. So essentially between now and end of calendar year into early 25 is when we would be looking to follow up on those. And one additional point from a timing perspective, and I'll turn it to other colleagues if they have more to add from their divisions, is that these additional prospective changes we will be looking to make also have an implementation component in terms of getting embedded within our system, within Permit Arlington, and that's additional work that requires additional time, which requires the time frame to extend beyond the next 6 weeks. So with that, I'll turn it over to other colleagues if there's anything to add.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Debbie Albert, Deputy Zoning Administrator. From a zoning perspective, we had identified a number of fees on the zoning fee schedule for which we did not have good data on the amount of time it takes for us to process those permits. So we have not effectively designed the upcoming analysis that we need to do, but we need to have some additional time to get some better data on how much time it takes to review certain types of permits. Those categories of permits are generally fees associated with the review of trade permits, and a lot of the fees associated with building permits that are related to development that is governed under site plan. Those types of permits, because every site plan is basically its own zoning ordinance, often take an additional amount of research in order to process those permits, making sure that they're in line with those site plan conditions as well as the zoning ordinance regulations. So there is an additional analysis to be designed, but we don't have a timeline at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Another question that I had with regards to it, and kind of a scoping question, it appears that there was some effort being made to sort of realign some fees from DES to planning, and is that sort of an overall policy change? Like, are we moving in a policy direction for that? Was there sort of an impetus? Because in some cases it seemed like a leveling out almost. Like the DES fees maybe went away and were just like reallocated to the planning side. Is that?
Hi. I'm Louis Soraya, Chief Development Services in DES. Most of the fees we dropped from the planning fees were fees that were for certain types of reviews that are performed with CPHD that my staff did not perform much or did much work. Okay. So it was a charge that was being charged for the sake of being charged, and we felt it was more equitable to let developers know that we're not going to charge for things we're not looking at, sometimes hardly ever. So we remove the number of them.
Okay.
And we just focus on the ones that are actually planning related, where DES is an active participant in the infrastructure piece of planning work that goes to the county board.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I appreciate that that was sort of a thoughtful consideration to looking at fees. I think for us to be good partners to developers, we should be upfront about what it is we're actually looking at if we're doing these reviews. The last question, and maybe I just didn't understand this, with regards to the technology fee, when you were sort of comparing the 2024 to 2025, you said you adjust the numbers for inflation. Did you also adjust them by adding that 10% fee to both? Because it doesn't exist right now, right? It will be added for 2025?
Correct. A 10% technology fee would be added for the very first time to DES fees.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it wasn't part of any leveling, if you will, with the other business units that
Sure.
we're speaking to. It was more so to the earlier point that we have to maintain and support a system that's been up now and running. And it does come with a cost to make sure it's functioning and available to the public. And then it's also to replenish the fund, the actual technology fund, to be able to provide additional online services, changes to our website, other technology-related changes.
Thank you. Okay, so I saw Commissioner Peterson and then Commissioner Streiner. Great.
Okay, 2 questions. The first is, can you pull up the slide that showed the planning DES sample projects proposed fees? There were 4 examples. Okay, this one. So under the rezoning line, I'm wondering if there's a math error, because it's showing the total for 2024 is 24,000. The 2025 is 19,000. So shouldn't the total difference impact be like minus 5,000? Because it's like, it was 6,000 2 years ago, it will be, or last year, it'll be 0 this year. So the DES customer impact difference should be minus 6,280. So then the total would be like minus 5,000.
You are correct. Thank you.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm that my math was mathing. Okay, my second question is about the cost recovery model. I really like that as a model for our county services. When a small percentage of people are using a government service, they can help offset that cost instead of the whole tax base. And we did that with Parks and Rec a few years ago, and I think that was a really good approach. How often will you reassess your cost recovery fees to make sure you're keeping up with maybe you find out that some of the fees that you were estimating were taking a lot longer than you were expected, or not taking as much time. So do you have a plan for how often this will be reassessed?
We really appreciate that question. At a minimum, every 3 years. Yeah.
So on the thread of technology, and my job across the river, we're actually updating our permitting software. So I'm curious, does the software itself that you all use for permitting, and does that need an upgrade as well, or just the fees? Because some of these can look a little old.
Again, we really appreciate that question. Yeah. The current system, we call it Permit Arlington, is a replacement of a legacy system, which was Permit Plus. Happened to be the same vendor. That's a very small space in permitting systems, sure, as you likely know from your other job. And so, the technology fee is actually, that system has gone live. So the replacement, the carryover of the old data, everything is in the new system. And again, the technology fee is to make sure that that new system, for which there was a lot of staff time and a lot of dollar resources, to pay the vendor and ongoing hosting and maintenance, have you, that upkeep is upkeeping, if you will, and plus other technology improvements over time. I don't know, Debbie, if there's anything you want to add around Permit Arlington.
I guess I would only add that it is a brand new system.
Okay, so it is a brand new system.
Yeah, it is a system that was, there was about a 7-8 year project to migrate all of our data from our old legacy system, Permits Plus, to the new Permit Arlington system, which is in Excella. It was a 6-year project. The first group of permits went live in 2019. The final group of permits just went live in September of 2023. So we just reached a big milestone. We hope we don't need to replace it soon. But it is a hosted cloud-based service. So part of that is it moves along with technology, but obviously, as Ms. Hernan said, at some point it will need to be replaced. It will not last forever, and that's what that technology fee is for.
Got it. Yeah. Well, congrats on it being done.
Yeah,
I know
thank
those things take forever.
Big lift.
Yeah. Was that used with capital funded money, or was this all operating money?
It was operating through the development fund. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was part of building that reserve in the first place, so we could be in that position to provide
Gotcha.
that customer
So
service.
now these fees and the 10%.
To replenish
will
for additional
break
changes
even.
and maintenance.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate everybody on all of this. It looks like it was pretty in-depth. I just have one question, and this gets back to when Anthony speaks later. Is this all factored in on without two positions maybe being approved here? And would it factor in if managers now have to do the work of staff, that there might be pay differences or anything? I guess my bottom line question is, does this, regardless of the positions approved or not, are these numbers exactly the same from a standpoint of recovery? So.
Sure. No, thank you for that question. And yeah, relating back to some of the conversation we were having last week in Long Range Planning Committee, I think, in the context of those two potential reductions that are in the manager's budget, I don't frankly see a lot of impact one way or the other on the findings from this analysis. Yes, there may be, I think, the one-off or the exceptional project where perhaps a supervisor or manager is stepping in and doing a body of work or taking on a body of work that perhaps a principal planner might. But again, I think that's more the exception, and therefore, I think we have confidence in the findings and the numbers here that really they would still be applicable for the most part in a situation where our staffing levels were to change.
Okay. No other comments? We thank you very much for the presentation, and thanks. Oh, yeah.
Just if the chair so desires, this is an action item, and so this will be on the. So again, every year we have this conversation. It's a little bit awkward because I think the Planning Commission hears this item at their March meeting. The county board has their public hearing on this item in April and then acts on it in April. But unless the clerk wishes to correct me, I believe we typically have, or the commission typically has put forth a letter to the board in time.
And you're looking for a motion? We expect a motion
It's
for
up to the
this.
commission if you want to put it up for a motion and take a vote, or to somehow other wise or through some other means of putting together a letter, that's at your discretion.
Commissioner Peterson has indicated that she will make a motion, so I will turn the floor to Commissioner Peterson for said motion.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the County Board to adopt the fiscal year FY 2025 changes to CPHD Development Fund, development-related fees as depicted on the inspection services and zoning fee schedules related to building and trade permits, administrative changes, form-based code applications, site plan applications, administratively reviewed permits and requests, certificates of occupancy, variances, use permits, and other fees as shown in attachments A and B, effective July 1st, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Streiner. Is there any further discussion with the commission? Okay. With that, we will move to a vote. Commissioner Streiner?
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Weir?
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli?
Aye.
Commissioner
Aye.
Berkey?
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara?
Aye.
And Commissioner Steinberger votes aye as well. The motion passes unanimously, 10-0. Oh, he's on the phone? I thought, no, he was out tonight. He was not attending. Yeah. The motion passes 10-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, can you call the next item, please?
So we are now going to approve our meeting minutes from the February 12 and 14 PC meetings and any current matters we may have from Mr. Pfeiffer. And that will be it for the evening.
Does anyone have a motion with regards to the meeting minutes?
I seek unanimous consent for approval of the February 5th meeting minutes of the Planning Commission.
Is there unanimous consent? Any objection?
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. Is it my imagination or are the minutes a little more sparse than they used to be?
Okay, I'm actually gonna ask, because you already had a motion, I'm gonna rule that out of turn. We can turn to that once we've addressed the unanimous consent motion now, and then we can move to that. Any objection to unanimous consent motion that's on the floor? Okay, so we've approved the motion, the minutes for February 5th.
February 12th
February 12th.
and 14th.
I seek unanimous consent for the
Well, in that case, I'm
approval.
actually going to go to Commissioner Bagley's comment then, and then we'll go back to the unanimous consent. You raised a question?
Yeah, I just noticed in reading the minutes, unlike previous minutes where it said Commissioner Steiner said this, they said that, whatever. Now it's just they moved this, that. So, and I realize that this is all recorded and everything, but I was just curious. It's not really, I mean, it's just basically procedure. That's it. So I just, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Just asking.
Is that a question for staff? I have not particularly noticed a change to the minutes. I don't know if anyone, if staff wish to be heard on that, or if there was a particular question for Mr. Pfeiffer. I see you turned on your mic, so we'll turn the floor to you.
Thank you, Matt Pfeiffer, Planning Division. No, I was just going to speculate, perhaps Commissioner Bagley confusing it with the Planning Commission letters that go to the board every month. Those are the ones that are very detailed and get into the granular deliberation, as opposed to the meeting minutes, which I think are usually just capturing the motions that the commission made and how the votes were recorded.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Patel to make a motion.
Seek unanimous consent for approval of the February 11th meeting minutes of the Planning Commission.
I believe it's the 12th and the 14th.
Are we doing one at a time?
You said 11th.
I thought I said 12th. Clarification, February 12th.
Okay, any objection? None. Okay, that passes.
I seek unanimous consent for approval of the February 14th meeting minutes of the Planning Commission.
Okay, any objection? All right, that is approved as well. So we have passed the meeting minutes. Are there any other items to be heard from the Planning Division? SPRC rosters? Okay. But first, are there any other items to be heard from planning staff? Since that was
No items this month.
No items this
Chair.
month. Okay, great. Then I think we have an SPRC.
Yes, I sent you all my chair report for the SPRC subcommittee. We do have one roster to amend tonight. So colleagues, I don't think it was sent around. So can we put it up on the screen, please? Okay, so before you shortly will be the proposed subgroup roster amendments for Crystal City Block W, 2025 Crystal City Drive. Madam Chair, I ask for your unanimous consent to amend the previously adopted roster.
Any objection? Without objection, so moved.
And that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, great. I also know we got an LRPC report by email. Any other reports that needed to be heard from any commission subgroups? Okay, wonderful. Well then,
Question of staff.
okay.
You mentioned that tonight's action item won't be heard by the county board until April. Is that
Anthony,
correct?
do you recall the date? I believe it's April 4th is the budget hearing.
The reason I ask is I'm on tap to represent the planning commission at this month's county board meeting. And it looks like there is nothing that will be going to the county board from tonight's meeting.
Can I switch with you?
Too late, too late.
I believe that is a true statement. As it relates to the second item on the agenda tonight, it is absolutely true. The board is going to have their public hearing on those fees as part of their budget package, I believe on April 4th, and then they would act on it later in the month at their regular meeting or their recessed meeting. But I can give you the exact date, but
Well,
the answer is.
I'm not on tap for April, so I don't
The
care.
answer is for March, this action item from tonight will not be heard by the county board in March.
Okay, so other than double checking to make sure nothing weird comes up, I can sleep in that Saturday morning.
I think that we would, I don't know what Mr. Fusarelli was going to say, but I think we would still appreciate perhaps if you would still watch the hearing to, even participate
make sure.
remotely, just to sort of be available should there be something that occurs. And we do appreciate your diligence with that, Commissioner
Right, that's what I
Lindell.
said, in case something weird happens, but
Yes.
other than that,
I'm not demanding that you show up here in,
Right.
fancy dress for something that we don't expect, but if you could participate remotely or be prepared to at least, that would be appreciated.
very good.
Commissioner, Mr. Fusarelli, were you going to say something further on that?
Just to clarify that the county board's April meeting dates are the 20th and the 23rd.
Okay, thank you.
So that is, depending on whether or not the budget is taken up and acted on the Saturday regular meeting or on the Tuesday recessed meeting, those would be the two dates for which tonight's item would be heard or would be acted on and considered and acted on.
Okay. Thank you, and we will make sure the person for April is well versed on that. Mr. Weir, Commissioner Weir, you have something you want to say?
Commissioner Berkeley forwarded the commission a feedback survey on Barcroft Apartments, land use analysis. Please fill it out if you have not already done so. Thank you.
And what is the due date on that?
I believe it's March 24th.
Okay.
That sounds right.
Yep.
I would just do it this weekend.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other items, we're done at 8.
Yay.